very different answers to this, I'm sure, for different countries. Dealing with these different countries, with one company, different countries, different workforces, with just all these different cultures. Mm-hmm. Was that a hard thing to navigate from your perspective? I assume it was very uncomfortable. You talk about getting into that uncomfortable process, but from your perspective, what did you have to do? Was it more like reading? Was it research? Was it just talking to people? Like, how did you get across that? Was it a mix of things?
Yeah, definitely a mix. There's one example that comes to mind, or one experience that comes to mind that really highlighted how challenging this can be, and it was that at one of those employers, we were doing a round of redundancies, as happens, and it was a global one. You know, we were making people in tens of countries and dozens of countries redundant at the same time, and that's probably up there with one of the more complex things I've ever been a part of, just in terms of not only do you have local obligations, but you have the cultural expectations, and then you have the company and what it's trying to achieve, and its kind of principles around how it sees that. And I think, at the time we took I would say we probably took a very Western Anglo lens to how we did the layoffs, but it was very generous. But even things like, when you do a round of redundancies, and I think, here in Australia, we're fundamentally used to it being because you no longer have need for that role for whatever reasons, downturn of business, etc. That similar cultural lens doesn't apply in every country. And so, you get questions around, well, hang on, why don't we use this as a press? Why aren't we getting rid of all our poor performers? Why aren't we targeting performances for redundancies and things like that? And so trying to be consistent and cohesive and one rule for all in some respects across that many different countries is incredibly challenging, not only in terms of execution but in terms of messaging, and how you actually run something like that. That was one of the most interesting kind of eye-opening experiences for me, in terms of that global context. And we did basically a 24-hour shift, right? Like, we had people in my team and in other teams who were waking up, they were participating in their role in the layoff. So whether you were running a call or something like that, we had a 24-hour cycle so that we could cover all corners of the globe. Trying to give people a heads up that this change was happening, consult with them where we needed to, have the conversation, give them the consultation period. Again, some of these concepts are very foreign for a lot of countries. So it's taking an approach that we thought was right and aligned with our values more often than not. And I think, in fact, in every case, it exceeded the requirements of the country that we were laying somebody off in. But we were doing things that were totally unusual for that space. I mean, let's talk about the US again. They've got at-will employment in most places. You can say to someone, pack your things up today. And, we've all seen the movies where people leave with their archive boxes. That's a reality of their employment. But, we would, in this example, we were doing 3-month payouts. That's just not common for them. Usually it's a 2-week thing. Maybe you get a few weeks for each year of service. So that greatly exceeded, and it was obviously welcomed by them. But that's just one example of how what we were doing in practice was very different to the cultural norms of the space we were operating.